Saturday floor, and you know what I'm talking about here on my channel right now.
Buckle up, because this one is a full-blown whirlwind. Some days in pop culture feel like a slow drip of updates. And then there are days like this, where it feels like someone kicked over the filing cabinet of celebrity chaos and just let everything spill onto the floor at once. Lawsuits. Voice notes. Alleged druggings. Political depositions. Snowball assaults. Fake pregnancies. Government jets. Elevator shafts. And somehow, it all connects through one common thread, accountability. Let's start where the temperature is hottest right now. Justin Baldoni and those unearthed, unsealed voice notes sent to Blake Lively when she was cast in It Ends With Us, because when I listened to them carefully, not emotionally, not through the lens of Team Blake or Team Baldoni, but just listening as someone who understands human dynamics, I heard something interesting. Not harassment, not abuse, not some smoking gun. That proves a legal claim. What I heard was something far more subtle: ego management. Fragility. And maybe, just maybe, the origin story of resentment. The audio, now being circulated widely, captures Baldoni leaving Blake a message after a fitting. He sounds excited, energized, proud of his casting decision. He compliments how she looks in wardrobe. He says he got chills when he saw the images load in a department head meeting. He tells her she looks beautiful and that it's going to work so well. And now pause there. If you strip away internet bias and courtroom strategy for a moment, what is that? It's a director complimenting his lead actress in the context of wardrobe for a film. That's it. There's no inappropriate undertone. There's no sleazy implication. He's not commenting on her body in a personal way. He's not saying anything outside the creative process, and yet, tone matters, because what happens next is where things get delicate. He starts talking about the casting process for young Lily. He explains they received over 2,600 submissions. He describes callbacks. He walks her through how seriously they took the search, and then he says something that, while honest, might not have been strategic. For years, he explains, a fan favorite, Abigail Cohen, was who many hardcore readers envisioned as Lily. Younger. Beautiful. Eager. Auditioning persistently. A favorite among fans. Now let's slow down. Is that harassment? No. Is it insulting? Not directly, but is it necessary information to tell your lead actress, who just had multiple children, who may already feel pressure about age in Hollywood, who had the character's age rewritten to accommodate her casting? Probably not, because here's what actors are: they are walking nerve endings wrapped in talent. Their faces are their currency, their age is their vulnerability. Their relevance is their oxygen. So when Baldoni casually explains that fans wanted someone younger for years, even if he follows it by saying, but she doesn't look like you, even if he says Blake was always the vision for the mature version of the story, you can see how that seed plants itself, and seeds don't grow overnight. They sit, they simmer, they turn into narratives, especially in Hollywood, where perception becomes truth faster than facts do. And now let's be clear, none of this proves wrongdoing. None of it supports a harassment claim. None of it justifies lawsuits. But motivation? That's a different conversation, because if someone feels insecure early on, if they feel like they weren't the original fantasy choice, that insecurity doesn't disappear. It morphs. It might become hyper-awareness on set. It might become frustration over editing access. It might become heightened sensitivity to tone. It might become suspicion, and suddenly, every neutral comment feels loaded. That's human psychology, not legal theory. And Baldoni, in that message, vacillates. You can hear it. He talks through marketing angles. He mentions how casting the younger fan favorite could be a genius marketing hack. He's thinking out loud, but thinking out loud in Hollywood is dangerous, because actors don't want to hear that there was a marketing calculation involving someone else. They want to believe they were destiny. They want to believe they were always the only choice, especially when they're stepping into a role that requires vulnerability. So when people online ask, was Blake triggered? I think that's too simplistic. Triggered implies irrationality. What I think happened, potentially, is something more nuanced. She may have felt subtly diminished, not attacked, not harassed, but compared, and comparison in Hollywood is currency warfare. Now, again, none of this proves she should take him to court. None of it excuses escalation. But if we're looking at human dynamics instead of legal filings, we can acknowledge something without picking a team. Words matter, timing matters, ego matters, and when Baldoni says, "She's beautiful, but she doesn't look like you," that's walking a tightrope. Imagine telling your partner, "There was this beautiful person everyone wanted for years, but don't worry, you're perfect." Even if you mean it sincerely, you've introduced a comparison that didn't need to exist, and in a business where age is weaponized against women constantly, that comparison lands heavier than intended. Again, not harassment, but possibly the first domino. Now zoom out, because while Hollywood debates voice notes and motivations, there's another courtroom brewing chaos. Laura Owens and the alleged fake pregnancy scandal involving former Bachelor Clayton Echard. If the Baldoni story is subtle psychology, the Laura Owens case is psychological warfare. 14 counts. A plea deal floating in the AIR.AN expiration date extended, and a community that spent months pushing for accountability because no one wanted to touch the story at first. Clayton recently hinted that what he's been told about the plea deal isn't enough. He says the accountability might not be sufficient to stop her behavior. He's frustrated, exhausted. 3 years deep into a nightmare that started with a claim of pregnancy, twins, no less, from what he maintains was a non-intercourse encounter. Let that sentence sit for a second. The justice system moves slowly. And when manipulation intersects with public humiliation, the damage multiplies. Clayton's message wasn't polished PR. It was someone who sounds tired of fighting but terrified of stopping. He worries she'll do it again. He worries someone else won't survive it. He worries consequences won't match the pattern. And that's where this conversation expands beyond reality TV drama, because male victims, especially in reputational cases, often get dismissed. Man up. You're 6 feet 5 inches. Get over it. But reputational destruction doesn't care about your height, mental health doesn't care about gender stereotypes, and when someone weaponizes systems, restraining orders, emails to employers, public accusations, the collateral damage is real. There are female victims in this case too. Former friends, associates, people who crossed her path and found themselves targeted. When someone's back is against the wall and they respond by escalating instead of reflecting, that's a dangerous place, because desperation plus vindictiveness is combustible. And now layer that with the broader theme of today, accountability. Elisa Rinna claims she was drugged with fentanyl at a party. That's not reality TV petty drama. That's a federal crime if true. High levels of amphetamines allegedly in her system. An ongoing investigation. Security footage potentially being reviewed. If proven, someone attempted to chemically incapacitate a public figure at a high-profile event. That's not gossip. That's criminal. Then you have Captain Sandy from Below Deck accusing a contractor of defrauding her out of $15 million, leaving her home unfinished, wires hanging, trust shattered. Courtroom confrontations. Public outrage. Another accountability story, and in the political arena, depositions tied to Jeffrey Epstein's orbit. Hillary Clinton denying recollection. Questions about missing DOJ files. Demands for transparency across party lines, regardless of political allegiance. One principle should remain consistent: if you testify under oath, the truth should follow. Accountability cannot be selective. And while that storm brews, the FBI director is allegedly using government jets for personal travel, golf trips, sporting events, lifestyle perks. Waste, fraud, and abuse being debated by the same people who campaign against it. Again, accountability. Even the snowball incident in New York becomes a microcosm of the same debate. What constitutes assault? Intent versus impact. Mob mentality versus individual responsibility. Gray areas inside systems. Every story today, Hollywood, reality TV, politics, crime, circles the same drain. Who answers when power is misused? Who pays when reputations are damaged? Who gets protected? Who gets prosecuted? And in the middle of it all, perception battles rage. Baldoni releases audio that may have been intended to clarify, but instead reopens narrative wounds. Clayton teases that justice may fall short. Rinna hints at a crime with explosive implications. Clinton faces deposition while questions swirl around missing files. Kash Patel allegedly enjoys jet setting while investigations stalled. Snowballs become assault charges, contractors become courtroom defendants, and through it all, the public watches, reacts, speculates, and demands answers. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: we live in an era where narrative moves faster than verdicts, and sometimes, narrative is the punishment. The plea deal implications. the fragility of celebrity branding, the politics of distraction, and the bigger question, is accountability actually happening, or are we just watching performance? Because what ties all of this together isn't just scandal, it's escalation, and escalation rarely begins with something explosive. It begins with something small that goes unaddressed. A comment. A comparison. A lie that isn't corrected. A system that shrugs. A loophole that gets exploited. A jet that takes off without oversight. A rumor that becomes a headline. Let's go back to Baldoni and Blake for a moment, not to relitigate the audio, but to examine the ripple effect. When that voice note surfaced, it wasn't shocking in content. It was revealing in texture. You could hear enthusiasm. You could hear creative energy. But you could also hear something else, calculation, not malicious calculation. Not sinister plotting. But a filmmaker thinking about branding, fan bases, optics, and market positioning. He talks about marketing hacks. He talks about what hardcore fans wanted. He talks about perception, and that's where things get complicated, because when art intersects with marketing, actors become product, even A-list actors, even powerful ones, even ones married to other megastars. Once you start discussing casting choices as strategic fan appeasement, you're no longer talking about pure artistry. You're talking about packaging, and packaging can feel dehumanizing. Now imagine you're Blake Lively. You've built a career on charm, charisma, fashion credibility, and franchise success. You've aged in an industry that punishes women for aging. You've had children under the microscope of paparazzi culture. And you're stepping into a role that required the character's age to be adjusted. Even if no one says the word age out loud, it's floating in the room. So when you hear your director mention that fans wanted someone younger for years, even in a neutral tone, it doesn't land as neutral. It lands as, you weren't the original fantasy. And that's not illegal. It's not harassment. It's not grounds for a lawsuit, but emotionally, it's destabilizing, and destabilized relationships on set rarely improve with time. They calcify, they turn into micro-tensions. Editing room access becomes symbolic, marketing decisions become personal, press tour dynamics become coded. Every neutral interaction gets filtered through the first moment of discomfort. Now let's flip it from Baldoni's perspective. His likely thinking, I'm being transparent. I'm being collaborative. I'm treating her as an executive producer level partner. I'm inviting her input. I'm praising her look. I'm sharing the journey. Transparency, however, is only valuable when the recipient wants the full truth. Sometimes, leadership requires selective silence, and that's the lesson here. You don't tell your lead actress that fans envisioned someone younger for years, not because it's wrong, but because it's unnecessary. That's not dishonesty. That's diplomacy, and Hollywood runs on diplomacy. The bigger issue, though, isn't whether Baldoni misspoke. It's how quickly public opinion fractures when fragments of communication get released, because in today's media environment, an audio clip isn't evidence, it's ammunition. Pro Baldoni audience is here, professionalism. Pro Blake audience is here, insecurity triggers, neutral observers here, awkward oversharing, and suddenly, nuance evaporates. Now zoom back into the Laura Owens plea deal, because this is where escalation moves from emotional to legal. Clayton's statement hinted at something important: accountability might not match the behavior. That sentence carries weight. 14 counts were filed. Investigations took months. Community pressure forced attention. Evidence had to be compiled, timelines reconstructed, contradictions exposed, and yet, plea deals exist for a reason. They reduce trial costs, they secure admissions, they avoid unpredictable juries, but they also sometimes leave victims feeling like justice was negotiated down. Clayton's fear isn't just about punishment. It's about deterrence. Will this stop her? Because if someone demonstrates a pattern, escalating claims, filing restraining orders, contacting employers, lying under oath, and the consequence is perceived as light, what message does that send? This isn't just about one reality TV scandal. It's about how systems respond to manipulation. When someone weaponizes pregnancy claims, especially in a culture where reproductive issues are deeply sensitive, the accusation alone can destroy someone, and once reputational destruction occurs, even a not guilty verdict doesn't fully repair it. Google results linger, whispers linger, doubt lingers. That's the silent cost of public accusations, and when Clayton talks about male victims, he's tapping into something society struggles with. We have frameworks for discussing violence against women, and rightly so. But reputational and psychological abuse doesn't discriminate by gender. If a man is falsely accused, the stereotype says he should toughen up. But reputational annihilation doesn't respect masculinity stereotypes. When someone emails your employer, when someone files legal claims, when someone goes public with accusations, you don't sleep normally, you don't work normally, you don't live normally, and if the justice system responds with a plea deal that feels procedural instead of protective, frustration builds. That's the escalation pattern again. Now pivot to Lisa Rinna's claim of fentanyl in her system. If true, that's not messy celebrity drama. That's attempted poisoning territory. Fentanyl isn't casual. It's lethal at microscopic doses, and when someone alleges high levels were found in their system at an industry party, the implication is chilling. Was it intentional? Was it accidental contamination? Was it targeted? Was it random? Until investigations conclude, it remains allegation. But the mere possibility shifts the conversation about safety in celebrity circles. Hollywood loves glamour, but behind velvet ropes there's often chaos, and if someone slipped something into her drink, that's not scandal, that's a felony. Which brings us to Captain Sandy's contractor battle. $15 million allegedly gone, unfinished home, wires hanging, courtroom confrontation. Construction disputes are notoriously messy. Delays, cost overruns, scope changes, but when trust collapses publicly, it becomes another example of power meeting vulnerability, because even wealthy public figures can be financially devastated if oversight fails. Again, accountability. Then we land in the political arena. Depositions connected to Epstein, missing DOJ files, claims of selective transparency regardless of which party someone supports. The principle should remain nonpartisan. If you are connected to a criminal network, proximity deserves scrutiny. Hillary Clinton says she doesn't recall encounters. Photographs exist of various political figures with Epstein over decades, because power circles intersect. The real issue isn't who was photographed with whom. It's whether criminal knowledge existed, and if files are missing, that undermines public trust across the board. Trust erodes not because of guilt, but because of opacity. And when opacity meets polarization, everything becomes conspiracy fuel. Now layer in Kash Patel, allegedly using government jets for leisure trips, golf outings, sporting events, travel unrelated to core FBI duties. If true, that's not just optics, that's taxpayer money funding lifestyle. The irony becomes glaring when anti-waste rhetoric collides with private jet privileges, and once again, the public sees a familiar pattern. Rules for you, flexibility for us. That perception, fair or not, is what drives public anger more than any individual incident. Even the snowball arrest in New York becomes symbolic. In isolation, it's minor. In context, it becomes a debate about policing, proportional response, and narrative framing. Is throwing a snowball assault? It depends. If it's powder tossed lightly, probably not. If it's ice-packed and aimed at someone's face, potentially yes. Context determines crime. And context is what today's media ecosystem often strips away. We consume fragments. We react to headlines. We build positions before full facts emerge. That's the environment all these stories are unfolding in, and here's the through line that connects everything from Baldoni's voice note to Epstein depositions. Perception is now as powerful as proof. If enough people believe something backfired, it did. If enough people believe accountability failed, it did. If enough people believe systems are corrupt, trust collapses. Now step back. What are we actually witnessing? Not just scandals. We're watching institutional stress tests, Hollywood relationships under stress, the justice system under stress, political transparency under stress, media credibility under stress, and stress reveals fault lines. The Baldoni audio revealed how fragile ego and marketing calculations can intersect. The Laura Owens case revealed how long it takes for legal systems to respond to manipulative patterns. The Rinna allegation revealed how unsafe even elite spaces can be. The Epstein depositions reveal how decades-old power networks still haunt modern politics. The jet controversy reveals how anti-waste messaging clashes with elite privilege. The snowball case reveals how quickly minor incidents become political talking points. Every single story today is about one thing: who gets protected, who gets prosecuted, who gets believed, who gets ignored, and more importantly, does accountability depend on influence? That's the question people are really asking, because if Baldoni released that audio to strengthen his image, but it reopened psychological debates, that's narrative backfire. If Clayton fought for years only to receive a plea deal that feels insufficient, that's emotional backfire. If political leaders preach Transparency while files appear incomplete, that's credibility backfire. If officials preach fiscal discipline while using jets for leisure, that's ideological backfire. Backfire happens when strategy underestimates perception, and in 2026, perception moves at algorithm speed. So where does this leave us? It leaves us in a world where audio clips become character studies, plea deals become moral debates, depositions become partisan battlegrounds, snowballs become symbolic warfare, and the public, exhausted but engaged, keeps watching because deep down, people don't just want gossip, they want fairness, they want systems that respond proportionally, they want consequences that match conduct, they want transparency without redaction, they want leaders who don't operate above the rules they enforce, whether it's a film director navigating casting sensitivities or a former bachelor fighting a false pregnancy narrative. The same principle applies, and power must be balanced with responsibility, and responsibility requires restraint. Baldoni maybe should have restrained his transparency. Owens allegedly failed to restrain her escalation. Officials allegedly failed to restrain privilege. Political actors often fail to restrain partisanship. Restraint is underrated because once escalation begins, it rarely de-escalates naturally. It requires intervention. Sometimes that intervention is legal. Sometimes it's reputational, sometimes it's electoral, sometimes it's social, but it always costs something. So as all these stories continue unfolding, trials scheduled, investigations pending, depositions ongoing, the real question isn't which headline wins tomorrow. It's whether accountability, in any of these arenas, will feel real, because in a culture saturated with scandal, what shocks people isn't wrongdoing anymore. It's consequence, and until consequence becomes predictable instead of exceptional, these cycles will repeat. Another audio, another plea, another deposition, another jet, another viral clip, and we'll all be here again, trying to separate ego from evidence, allegation from fact, and strategy from sincerity. That's the rush, and the rush never really slows down.